Thunder Bay's former police chief is the latest to be nailed with criminal charges. Quebec's largest nurses union rejects government deal. CBC investigation finds that suspended police officers cost Ontario taxpayers $134 million over the last decade. Sudan marks 1 year since the start of the war there. Iran launches retaliatory attack on Israel. And Cyprus says it will suspend asylum applications for Syrian refugees. Good morning. It's Monday, April 15th. I'm Nora. Here are your headlines. The Ontario Provincial Police has charged Sylvie Houth with obstructing justice, breach of trust, and obstruction. She was the former chief of police in Thunder Bay. Yes, you will remember from last week that their former lawyer had been arrested too. Houth is the third person now charged from the Thunder Bay Police Force. The report from Jordan Olmsted and Liam Casey with the Canadian Press says that Houth had been with the force for decades and then was chief for 6 years. The charges relate to them allegedly lying to a commission that was looking into misconduct at the force. The commission was established in the wake of tainted investigations into the sudden deaths of many Indigenous people. Says the article, quote, 9 of those deaths were reinvestigated because of how poorly they were initially handled, unquote. Next to Quebec, where members of Quebec's largest nurses union, the Fédération interprofessionnelle de la santé du Québec, voted against a tentative contract deal with the government. 61% of members voted against the deal, which had been recommended by the bargaining committee. 3/4 of all members showed up to vote. The union's president, Julie Bouchard, says that while she's disappointed that members rejected the deal she recommended, she's prepared to go back to the negotiating table with the new mandate. She said that there would be a consultation with members to figure out what pain points were and what pressure tactics, including an unlimited general strike, are still an option. You'll recall that nurses were negotiating at the same time as the teachers and other public sector workers as part of the Common Front negotiations. The FIC were not part of the Common Front, and they refused to accept a deal. It has held out to try and improve the hours of work and other workplace conditions. I have a few friends who are nurses who aren't all that political, and I know that there is a lot of anger over the conditions under which they've been placed to do their jobs. I'm not surprised that they're still not prepared to settle, and I really hope that they manage to keep their solidarity and strength, as the government surely hopes that they can just wait them out. Next, a CBC investigation has found that over the past decade, suspended police officers in Ontario have cost taxpayers $134 million. This story looked at publicly available information across 44 police services in the province. Some of the trends that they found in their research were that more than 1/3 of the allegations against suspended officers involved gender-based violence, including sexual assault, intimate partner violence, and sexual harassment. And just 1 in 10 officers were fired, while nearly half of all officers suspended and convicted of a crime returned to work. Until recently, Ontario was the only province to require that suspended officers get their full pay unless they were denied bail or sentenced to imprisonment. A new overhaul of the police law in the province came into effect on April 1st, and it will make it easier to have officers suspended without pay. Next to international news and first to Sudan. Today marks 1 year since the war in Sudan started. Around 5 million people are on the verge of experiencing famine conditions. Millions have been displaced and millions others have fled as refugees. Ottawa announced that it would provide $132 million to help with the crisis. $100 million will go towards humanitarian aid, while the rest will go towards development projects and helping support countries accept Sudanese refugees like in South Sudan, the Central African Republic, Chad, and Ethiopia. The announcement from Ottawa came ahead of a conference taking place in Paris today, marking 1 year of the war, to try and arrive at a ceasefire deal and shore up support for the crisis. The UN says that Sudan needs $2.7 billion US to deal with the humanitarian crisis, and that only 6% of that target has been met. Next to Israel, where over the weekend, Iran fired about 300 projectiles into Israel for the first time in history. This was a retaliatory attack. Recall that Israel has attacked Iran's embassy in Damascus earlier this month, killing several people and damaging Canada's embassy there in the process. Israel is now saying it will respond, quote, when the time is right, unquote. The Iranian attacks were intercepted by Israel, the US, Britain, Jordan, and various other allies. Following the attack, leaders from across the Western world, including Justin Trudeau, put out statements condemning Iran's attack. Iran said that it warned the U.S. and its allies 72 hours before the attack took place and informed them that it would be a limited attack. There are worries now that there could be an escalation to a regional war. As we're watching what is happening with Iran, Palestinian activists continue to remind us to keep a focus on the genocide in Gaza and focus our efforts on calling for a ceasefire. We don't really have a good count of casualties from Israel yet, but it looks like over the past weekend, Israel still killed more people in Gaza and the West Bank than Iran did with this counterattack. And finally, more than 1,000 Syrians have arrived by boat to Cyprus, hoping to claim asylum status there. But Cyprus is saying that it will suspend asylum applications because of an increase it saw this past month. The refugees have been arriving from Lebanon, which is only about 160 kilometers away from Cyprus. Some 2,000 people have arrived in Cyprus from Lebanon since the start of this year, compared to just 78 in the same time period last year. In reaction to this increase, the country's president has called on the EU to do more to assist Lebanon and to reconsider designing regions of Syria as quote-unquote safe for repatriation of some Syrians. More than 800,000 Syrian refugees live in Lebanon, with about 90% of them living in poverty. UN human rights groups have continued to insist that Syria remains unsafe for repatriation as it enters 14 years of war. Those are your headlines for Monday, April 15th. I'm Nora. April 15th. That means we're halfway through the month already. You are listening to this podcast at sandynora.com, on the Real News Network podcast feed, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Hope you have a great Monday. Hope you have a great week. I'm going to be ending my week in Edmonton. And so if you are in Edmonton or can get to Edmonton, come check us out at the Citadel Theatre. We will be there on Saturday next week. But until then, I'll talk to you tomorrow.